Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of The Game Plan. This is all about the San Francisco 49ers versus the New Orleans Saints. A fantastic game. Can't wait to talk about it more with everybody. If you're new to the show, here's what I do. I break down the key injuries. I talk about the key statistics, the key analytics. I sometimes call those gambler stats, and we'll explain them when we get there. We put those together and create a path to victory, a game plan to win for both the 49ers and the Saints, and they're both very interesting game plans when I dug deep into these. And then we'll tie this up and we put it all together with a fantasy football, daily fantasy projection for both teams of the key players. Now, I want to remind everybody of two things. One, before we get started, I'm not a fan of either of these teams. I don't, have a dog in this fight. I don't have any bias, positive or negative, of these teams. I just enjoy breaking down football games. That's what I do. Second, before we get rolling here, if you could give me 2 seconds of your time for 2 clicks, a like and a subscribe. We're really continuing to try to grow this thing. We're a YouTube partner now, which is awesome. Thank you for the support out there, everybody. But we're working on some really cool stuff after the NFL season, debuting a couple new shows, getting more personalities on here. Very, very cool. Once again, thanks for everybody's support. And once again, please like and subscribe. But let's start this episode, as I always do, with the key injuries. And I have to say, San Francisco has a lot of names on this list, but this is honestly probably the healthiest I've seen them in about 2 months. Seriously, as good as this 49ers team is, they're 10-2. Their 2 losses were on the last plays of the game, basically, to Seattle in overtime and Baltimore last week. Look, this is a very good game, very good team. I don't love that their defense is banged up, but I think a lot of these guys are questionable, and their offensive line is healthy, finally. George Kittle is going to be, he's going to be questionable for the rest of the season, but I think he's going to play. The Saints, meanwhile, Armstead, you got Pete, the left guard, he was out. I think that's a big injury. We'll talk about that in a bit. Kiko Alonso and Klein, I think those are big injuries, and we'll talk about them in a bit. We're talking game tactics. I'll get to that during the game plan. Let's look at the key stats here, and I do these in terms of yardage accumulation, just basically, how many passing yards do you have, how many running yards do you have, and I put position group versus position group. So you see at the top of the list there, we have the passing offense of the 49ers ranked 16th versus the 17th ranked passing defense of the Saints. Then you have the 9th ranked passing offense of the Saints versus the 1st ranked passing defense of the 49ers. Run offense is 2nd versus 3rd defense for the Saints, and then vice versa. You have the 17th ranked run offense versus the 22nd ranked run defense for the 49ers. I'm surprised they're that low, but hey, when your passing defense is that good, the teams have to attack you some way, and it just happens to be running. If I look at this and I'm looking for advantages, what do I see? I think that as good as the Saints passing offense has been, and credit, of course, Drew Brees, credit Michael Thomas, who's a monster, but when you look at this team, they basically have Michael Thomas, they have Jared Cook sometimes, you have Alvin Kamara to the backfield, and you have a lot of scheme. And that scheme, I got to say, Coach Payton's doing a hell of a job this year. There are going to be other coaches that are going to be talked about for Coach of the Year, but Payton is doing a hell of a job, in my opinion. We'll talk about the tactics a little bit later. I do favor the 49ers defense more than the very talented Saints passing offense, but again, I'll talk about that in a bit. Running-wise, I do think the Saints can run on the 49ers, but I think they have to do it a certain way, a way that they don't generally utilize, but we'll talk about that as well. And I think the San Francisco running offense versus the 3rd-ranked run defense, very interesting matchup. That defensive line for New Orleans could hold the game in the palms of their hands. They need to get it done this week. Let's move on to the key analytics here. Now, I call these analytics because gamblers, professional gamblers, they like to use these stats. And, of course, there's always a lot more that goes into it. But these are kind of the key drivers. Yards per play, both offensively and defensively. How efficient are you in key situations such as 3rd and 4th down, offensively and defensively? And, of course, in the red zone, can you punch it into the end zone and get a touchdown, or are you taking field goals? Lastly, we have what I call basically your discipline metrics. Do you take care of the ball, and are you decent in terms of penalty yardage against? So let's talk about these. You see 49ers, they gain per play 5.8 yards per play, and they give up 4.3 defensively. That 4.3 number is incredible. A net of the 49ers of 1.5 yards per play if you compare their offense versus defense. Now the Saints, meanwhile, they get offensively 5.8. They give up 5.1 for a net of 0.7. That's also very good. It's just not astronomically good like we see from the 49ers. Now, if you compare these, back and forth, you see the 49ers are at a plus 0.7 offensively, and you see that the Saints are, I guess, at a plus 1.5, but if you merge these two together, you could consider, basically the 49ers are going to offensively get about 4.5 yards per play, give or take, and you can see the Saints are probably more like at about a 5, again, if you're just taking straight averages. You look at the key, third down, fourth down conversions. I think both of these teams, 40s, low to mid 40s. Defensively, they're both very good at getting off the field. No surprise there. These are two 10-2 teams, right? The New Orleans Saints are now the number 1 seed. Last week, the 49ers were the number 1 seed. Now they are the number 5 seed. Can you believe it? They dropped 4 spots, and they're 10-2. They might be the best ever 5 seed in the playoffs. Seriously, they're incredible. Fourth down conversions, you see kind of similar stats there. I will say the 49ers defense is better at getting off the field on fourth down than the Saints have been, and they've been better at pushing drives forward. So what that means is at the end of the game, right, if the Saints need to score, and it's 4 down territory or something like that, I think it's more likely that the 49ers get the Saints off the field than if the situation is reversed and 49ers need to score. They're more likely to extend the drive in the fourth down. I think this is going to be a very close game, so that is actually a pretty key stat for me. Whoever takes the lead into the fourth quarter, I kind of favor there. Turnover margin, both teams are on the plus side. The Saints doing a little bit better at plus 0.9. I got to say, I'm surprised that the Saints are giving up 68 yards and penalty. That's not a great stat to me, but it's not much worse than the 49ers, so it's fine. Let's talk about path to victory, because tactically, I looked at the play charts all season, as I do when I put together my my daily fantasy football metrics. I look at, the position grouping, I look at rankings and all this stuff. Let's start with the 49ers. Look, Michael Thomas is the key to the passing game. He's so good, and Drew Brees is so accurate. They're going to get him passes. As good as the San Francisco 49ers defense is, Michael Thomas, you can't shut him down entirely. I just don't believe it's going to happen, okay? So he's going to get it, but I think they're going to limit him, not shut him down, but limit him, and I think that's a key to the game. Obviously, you can't have him going for 2 touchdowns. You'll lose the game that way. Kamara is going to be used. I think he's going to be used more off tackle and out of the backfield, and I think the 49ers will take their lumps with that. I just don't think they want to have any of the other guys that probably need to step up for New Orleans to step up. So I think they'll take their medicine there, and they'll probably try to guard the interior of that defensive line. Test the New Orleans Saints secondary deep. We know what the New Orleans Saints run defense is like, 3rd in the league. They're very good. They're very talented. Hardly anybody ever I talk to them about them every week, but I never hear anybody else talk about them. They're very, very good. And then so the secondary, you got to test them deep, because you don't want linebackers starting to crowd up in coverage. You don't want safeties start to come up to the box. You know that the 49ers are going to run the ball. They will establish the run. Their offensive line is very good, and they're healthy again. But I do believe Garoppolo is going to have to test this secondary deep and keep them honest, okay? Next to last, I should say, I like how the Saints secondary matches up against San Francisco, but they're banged up at linebacker. Now, throughout the season, I think they've done a very good job of covering linebackers, but with 2 of their linebackers out, I do think Kittle needs to step up, and I do think he'll need to win this battle. I need to see Kittle have about 80 to 100 yards of receiving this week to feel good about the 49ers and the stat sheet after the fact. Lastly, I think the Saints' defensive strength lines up well with what the 49ers want to do. Matchup-wise, I think it comes down to Deebo and Emmanuel Sanders winning their matchups. I don't know who Lattimore is going to be on, in my opinion. Let's just move over to the Saints, because this is kind of a combined point. In my opinion, Deebo Samuel is helping this offense move at this point. I think, and yes, I know Emmanuel Sanders has been banged up, and that's an issue as well, but so has Deebo Samuel. I think Lattimore matches up against Samuel. I think that's what I would do. We'll see what happens, okay? But either way, I think these guys for the 49ers have to win the day there. Now, let's talk about the Saints. Control the line of scrimmage defensively, as I was talking about before. Emmanuel Sanders, I mentioned, but like I said, Deebo Samuel seems to be more important, so that's why I say match up Lattimore on him. Involve Latavius Murray. I mentioned at the beginning of the show, I do think the Saints are going to have to attack the San Francisco defensive line with the run game. The teams that have had the most success against San Francisco this year have had a power running game, and I believe the Saints are going to have to basically involve Latavius Murray. Now, that's not a shot at Alvin Kamara by any means. What I'm saying is have Alvin Kamara work off tackle, have him work in the flats, have him work as a receiver, and just punish Latavius Murray and that San Francisco defensive line. Just run him up the middle and just tire them out as best as you can. I don't have Kamara taking those snaps. Those are down and dirty snaps. I want to keep Kamara fresh for other options. Now, I usually hate when Taysom Hill comes in, and I especially hate when he comes in and they move Drew Brees to the sideline, and Drew Brees just doesn't move because, of course, he doesn't want to get hit, and why would you? I think Taysom Hill adds another layer to this team. I do think they should sprinkle him in, but when they do it, and I say this, if you're going to do it, then do it. Take Brees off the field in that situation. I'm sorry, but if you have Brees against the San Francisco defense that's just going to be flying around to the ball, you can't play 10 on 11. If Brees is out there, they're not going to have to respect him. He's not going to go out for a route. And believe me, if I'm the 49ers defense, if I'm the defensive coordinator, I would just crash. I don't know why other teams don't do this. I would just crash. And you know what? If they do have the stones to throw the ball to Drew Brees 10 to 15 yards down the field, have your free safety take a shot on Drew Brees. I would love that if I was a defense. I would give up those 15 yards in that one play because they won't do it again after that. I can tell you that. Now, the New Orleans Saints, take them off the field, man. If you have Taysom Hill, run some read option, put another receiver in there. Go 11 on 11, and Taysom Hill's talented. So if you're going to do it, do it. Don't have Brees on the sideline just not running a route. It doesn't make any sense. It's stupid. And I like Peyton. I gave him love at the beginning of the show. But that's dumb, and it's not going to work against San Francisco, I can tell you that. Lastly, I think Jared Cook needs to win his matchup. It's tough to attack the San Francisco defense. That's what I was saying. You have to really kind of take your lumps in the running game, tire that defensive line out, take your 3 yards per carry in the first few quarters. Things will start to open up after that. And even having a run game in that establish of the run helps Michael Thomas both run his slants and go over the top as well. And by the way, Traquan Smith, Ted Ginn, somebody like that, if you're a Saints fan or if you're an NFL fan, you believe the Saints are going to win this game, it's going to be because a guy like Ted Ginn or Traquan Smith steps up. So if you truly believe that, I suggest playing them in daily fantasy, and that's actually a great segue to my fantasy football stats. Let's talk about the 49ers first. Jimmy Garoppolo, this is kind of a fringe start. I think he has to have a nice game to beat the Saints, and I think he will actually have a nice game. I think that I would not start him, though, in my fantasy football lineup. Tevin Coleman, Raheem Mostert, I like both of them. I think Mostert's better, but he doesn't always get the carries, though. I do think Coleman will be involved. It's kind of like a committee hot hand approach. We'll see what happens. Mostert had the hot hand last week. Will he have it another week? I don't know. Deebo Samuel, Emmanuel Sanders, they're both kind of fringe starts for me, but I would take Deebo Samuel this week. Kendrick Bourne, not a great projection there. George Kittle, I do think you start him, and I do think that is a start-worthy number there. And then defense and special teams, I like San Francisco, and I think they'll get to Drew Brees a couple of times this game. So sacks, I don't know about turnovers, but I think he'll get you some sacks, and that's a big deal. By the way, as we move forward into the New Orleans Saints projections here, RoccoBot is my daily fantasy sports, basically computer projection engine. I don't always agree with RoccoBot, but I'm happy to give these rankings out for free, and if I don't agree, I will tell you why. Now, Drew Brees, look, here's one I disagree with right here. Drew Brees is projected at 13.4. That's based on the strength of the San Francisco 49ers defense and what they've done to other quarterbacks throughout the year. So there's not a shot on Drew Brees. Let me tell you this. I'm going to overrule RoccoBot. I think he's more in that 18 range, just like we saw Garoppolo. I do think this game's going to be a little bit lower scoring than I think both teams are accustomed to seeing their offenses do. I think both defenses are very, very good, and I think that it'll be an interesting game. Alvin Kamara, I think, is a definite start. Latavius Murray at 2.7. I suspect that Coach Payton is going to be playing Latavius Murray a little bit more, so I think he'll beat that projection. I like Latavius Murray maybe even as a budget play, but I wouldn't play him in my fantasy football playoffs, that's for sure. Michael Thomas, definite start. I mentioned Ginn and Smith. I don't like either of these projections. If you believe in your heart of hearts that the Saints will win, start one of these guys in daily fantasy because it'll be worth it. Jared Cook has to outplay this projection for the Saints to win. And then the defense and special teams for the Saints, I actually like them a little bit more to beat this projection. I think they'll be in the 7 to 8 range, which is the definite start. So there you go. That takes me through the San Francisco 49ers versus the New Orleans Saints. Huge game, massive game. I can't wait to watch it. It's going to be on one of my TVs, believe me. So once again, everybody, please like and subscribe. I appreciate your support. The channel appreciates your support. Help Underdog TV grow. As always, we will be back with another episode soon. Check us back. Thanks.